清明時節雨紛紛，
Rain falls like tears on Qingming.
路上行人欲斷魂，
Mourners in the street feel lifeless.
借問酒家何處有？
Where can we find a bar for a drink?
牧童遙指杏花村，
The shepherd boy points to the village. Yeah. So simple, so elegant. I'm Pat Munday, and I'm president of the Mai Wah Society that cares for this wonderful old building that is such a crucial part of Butte's history. Butte is in some ways typical of the frontier community that evolved around mining. It attracted people of all ethnicities and for multiple trades. Not everyone was an underground miner. It took places like this at the Mai Wah Noodle Parlor to feed them 24/7 as they came on and off shift at the mines. So Chin Hin Dun, the elder Chin, first came to Butte, Montana and operated a mercantile store. And then as Chin Hin Dun became established, he greatly expanded his real estate in 1909 with this second, much larger building. He became really a rock within the Chinese community. Chinese throughout this 4-block Chinatown region would come to the Chin family for help with translation if they were dealing with some difficult problem with the American government. The Chins were the first stop. This myth is established that the Chinese can never assimilate to American life. That's totally ridiculous, of course, but this sort of mythology, this harmful, prejudicial mythology starts that the Chinese, by nature, have to be excluded from the American experiment. Butte was a fairly receptive community for Asian immigrants. Not that Butte was totally welcoming. There was discrimination and racism here, but it did not go to the extreme of violence that we see in other Western communities. As a hypothesis, Butte was an immigrant population. The Chinese were somewhat regarded sympathetically by the Irish immigrants, the Italian, the Slav immigrants, the Czechs, all the other European groups here, because they knew what it was to be an immigrant minority. They knew what it was to suffer signs put on doors, "No Irish need apply," Nina. So I think that sort of sympathy principle helped explain why the Chinese found a relatively welcoming opportunity here in Butte. We think about China as this really big country. It's about the same size as the United States. And so Chinese come from all over. They come from the north and from Inner Mongolia and from the far west. Well, that's not true in the 19th century. Virtually all of the 300,000 or so Chinese who came to America in the 19th century come from a very small area of southeast China. Historically, that area is called Canton. Today it's called Guangzhou. And even within that area, most of the Chinese who came didn't come from the city of Canton. They came from the Pearl River Delta. Many of the Chinese who came were already versed in either the mercantile trade, some kind of manufacturing, and most importantly, they knew about the world. Canton, the Pearl River Delta, was the only port that was open to Western trade. There was typically anywhere from about a half dozen to maybe a dozen herbalists that had practices here. They were very popular with both the Asian and the Caucasian population here. Hoi Pak is a great example because he had treated some of the very wealthy families and their children here in Butte. And if somebody saves your child's life, you put great stock in the doctor or the medical practice that achieved that. Hoi Pak achieved that. People could look to that and say, well, this Chinese medicine must be pretty good. So it's kind of a hard luck story. When Hoi Pak dies, he has given his son money so that his body, or maybe after he's been buried, his bones can be dug up and shipped back for burial in China. Well, his son blows the money. He spends the money. For some years, Dr. Hoi Pak's body resides in a mortuary. It's basically stored there. As the Western medical community in Butte hear about that, they say, this just isn't right. He was one of us. He was an accepted part of our medical community. So they raise money among themselves. They buy a nice plot in Mount Moriah Cemetery and a headstone, and he has a proper burial with a proper grave marker. If we look at, for example, some of the art that we have from the Chinese immigrant families, oftentimes in that art, we'll see cicadas. So the cicada, especially in traditional Chinese culture, is seen as this symbol of what it means to be born in the soil and to fly out into the air and then to return to the soil from whence you came. And I think a lot of miners get that. You have a sense of what it means to go underground for your 8-hour shift and to come back up into the light and the air. Part of the history and the romance of Butte is to imagine Butte in 1900, this thriving, industrial, multi-ethnic community, all kinds of celebrations, whether St. Paddy's Day for the Irish or Catholic Saints' Days for some of the Italian community, or Spring Festival or Qingming Festival for the Chinese Butte community. The Spring Festival of Qingming is also called the Tomb Sweeping Festival. And so in China, that means people travel sometimes thousands of miles to go back to the home village where grandma or grandpa are buried, to make a few prayers, to care for the graves, and then to celebrate life, to fly kites, to drink some wine, to eat some fruit. We feed their spirits, but then we also celebrate our life today, the life of our children. Butte is clearly a post-industrial community. If Butte is to have this kind of renaissance, it's finding our roots and celebrating those roots in ways that attract tourism. Plus, it's really cool to come to Montana in the summer, go to Yellowstone National Park, go to Glacier National Park, and make historical discovery part of that trip. So Butte tells that story in a lot of ways. We tell that story through the underground mining that was here. We tell that story through the Irish and Italian and Chinese heritage that was here. I hope that Americans, as we move into the future, don't forget about the roots, right? Our cicada existence, fallen leaves returning to the tree, I hope that we remember and cherish our history because it's a multicultural history. America is a multicultural place. That's our future. And yes, the Irish helped build Butte, but so did the Chinese.